Hey guys, what's going on? It's Brandon. This is a world exclusive video right here. I've noticed these clues a long time ago. We're talking 5 years ago, and I kept my mouth shut because one of the things that's a big pet peeve of mine is that people like Justin at Horsepower Obsessed and Brink of Speed and Keith Cornett and John Elligan, all these guys, they can't give credit where credit's due when something's explained to them by me. They instead like to say that they have inside sources and they heard it from a birdie and blah, 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 blah. And then on top of that, they like to discredit me and say I've never been right about anything. They like to destroy my credibility when a lot of times I'm the one where they get their information and understanding how these cars actually work. So I'm kind of sick of that. So I kind of sat back and I wanted to see, let's see what kind of birdies these guys actually have. And really, long story short, when you fast forward all the way to, what are we at, August of 2025, none of them have ever mentioned what I'm about to show you, okay? So don't be surprised when Justin at Horsepower Obsessed and GM Authority and Brink of Speed and all these guys become a big echo chamber and start explaining this to you. I've known this for a very long time and I've kept my mouth shut. I bought a oil tank a long time ago. Some of you who've been with the other channel a long time ago, you'll remember I bought the LT2 oil tank for the C8, separate, just out of the parts department, and just was looking at it, and I quickly realized what I was looking at. Okay, so let me show you here. Okay, this is an LT2 with the DCT attached to it. If hypothetically General Motors wanted to go to an all-wheel drive mechanical linkage system, like what Porsche used for many years, what Lamborghini and Audi have used for many years with the R8 and the all-wheel drive Lamborghinis, what Koenigsegg is now using, but Koenigsegg's is more clever because they've got electric linked into the all-wheel drive system. Okay, which is good because, as I've mentioned before, the way that Koenigsegg is doing it is spectacular because you have a linked up all-wheel drive system like the Nissan GTR, okay, that existed for all those years. It set a blistering fast lap time way back in the day on bad tires compared to what we have now. It was in like 704 or something like that. So that car could run sub 7 with good tires. The point is, mechanical all-wheel drive is very good because it's very predictable, okay? So you would say, Brandon, the problem is there's nowhere to run mechanical linkage through the car. Well, now I want to talk about Tony Roma's recent explanation about how the spine, which I'll go to his exact quote after a bit, but how the spine of the car has proved to be very versatile, basically, and good for the vehicle. As soon as he said that, I knew I was on the right track, but I've kept my mouth shut because I wanted to see if anybody else could figure out what Tony Roma was talking about. And instead, they all just say, there's an even faster car coming than the ZR1, which is wrong. There's not a faster car coming than the ZR1. The ZR1 will probably hold the top speed for a while. But the point is, and don't get me wrong, maybe something does, but I don't think anybody understands what's really going on here. So I've known for a long time, I'm going to use my key as a pointer here. I've known for a long time that it didn't make sense for General Motors to have the engine raised up so high and instead not have the engine all the way down. Because that's an extra 3 inches of space where they have these quote-unquote oil coolers, okay, underneath the LT6 Z06 engine and underneath this engine. They have these oil coolers under here, and it's like, why wouldn't you lower the engine all the way down? Why would you raise that center of gravity up when it hurts you? I want to point your attention to the starter motor, which is right here, okay? The starter motor, that's what that brassish color is, and then it's in there and it spins the big crank flywheel, okay? It spins all that. So what a lot of car companies are doing is they're getting rid of the flywheel because the reciprocating mass, okay, is enough to replace the flywheel. Now, I'm not saying General Motors is going to do that, but just keep that in mind. So let's say hypothetically you got rid of this guy, your starter motor, and let's say hypothetically you relocate your alternator. You now have a clear shot to run an output shaft straight up to here. And you say, well, Brandon, that's still not lined up with the center of the quote-unquote tunnel of the car. Okay. So, output shaft would be to here. Okay. Now, I want you to pay special attention to this oil tank. This oil tank, instead of it coming down and just going around the belt there at a diagonal, it's got this really weird, perfect radius right here, okay? And then it's got this long arm that goes over to this super reinforced bracket, which I'll show you more here in detail. So you got this super reinforced bracket on the front of the motor to hold heavy, huge weight, big mount points, a couple of them. And we've got this radius right here. I want you to imagine for a second that you get rid of this guy as well as this guy, okay? So you say, Brandon, you can't just get rid of the water pump and get rid of the alternator. Follow me here for a second. Let's say for a second that there was a gear, okay, and another gear here. Now, those two gears aren't touching each other, so you'd need a third gear. But then I want you to imagine the typical torque tube that General Motors has used all these years. Or just a shaft. Maybe you don't need a torque tube. Maybe you just run a shaft, a naked shaft. But the point is you have an assembly here of at least 2, potentially 3 gears, 1, 2, 3, that are going to be really thick gears as far as, depth goes, really thick. Because they're going to be able to hold big loads, big torques. And now you have an output shaft that goes up the tunnel of the car. Meanwhile, this here that mounts to the tank would bracket onto that torque tube. So the torque tube would be rigid to the motor. And those of you saying you can't do that, then you'd have to lower the torque tube out of the car with the motor. Right, that's how it used to work, guys. Go look at a C5, C6, C7. The torque tube and the transmission, everything lower out is one big piece. Okay, so now you'd have a torque tube that runs at the front of the car. Now, this guy here, you say, well, he's going to interfere. He's too big. Do you know why he has to be so big? He has to have a certain amount of surface area for the belt not to slip to power these two guys. The moment that you no longer have these two guys running off of this, and instead you only have the oil pump, okay, at that point, you can shrink him down. Now, there is another option as well. General Motors could run a front transmission off of this output shaft here, the crank, and run it forward. I don't think they're going to do that, though. I could be wrong. The other thing General Motors could do is they could put another gear here. Instead of run a belt, they could run a gear. And the oil pump could be off of another gear. So the oil pump will run off of a gear off of this. And this gear powers the shaft that goes to the front of the car. And again, you have a transmission at the front. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to run it out of the Tremec DCT. And it's going to come forward and have a couple gears here, a few gears that then come forward. And then this is going to bracket to the torque tube. Okay? So now you understand how it's feasibly possible. And you understand, wow, they designed the oil tank in the LT6 to make room for the turbos of the LT7. I can see what you're saying, Brandon. They've designed the LT2 block, which can be revised and be called the LT3 later, okay? But they designed this block to be able to hold this all-wheel drive. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that this whole system could have been tested and failed, and I'm going to get to why it could easily have failed, what the weak link is on it. Now, you're asking, well, what about the alternator and the starter motor? Where did those go? Behold the Cosworth Gordon Murray V12 that goes in the T50, okay? On the front of this motor is this pod. And this pod is the built-in alternator, all kinds of different gizmos. They're all built into that one guy right there, okay? And you can see you don't have all the things strapped to the side of the motor and you don't have any belts for the accessories just built into that. Now, the reason why that's important is because when this motor was being developed and when other motors who do the same thing were being developed by Cosworth, Cosworth was already developing the LT6, okay, helping General Motors with the LT6 because they did, and obviously the LT7. So once you understand that Cosworth could have easily leaked this information to General Motors, now we're going to go back to the image of this. So you said, okay, well, what are you going to do with all these accessories? They would go in the tunnel underneath the output shaft, okay? So they would still run by the crank, okay? So, sorry, I had to kill a bug. Okay, so with that said, okay. What else are we going to tell you? Okay, so mechanical all-wheel drive. Oh, by the way, so then at the front of the car, the electric motors would assist the all-wheel drive. So you put the electric motors up at the front, and they mechanically assist the shafts that are hard rigid to the DCT. And now what you have is you have an in sync